Good afternoon, Year 4, and welcome to your afternoon lesson, which is topic this afternoon. We are going to continue learning about the ancient Greek people and their civilization. Before we do that, I want to just quickly talk about topic and what that means. Sometimes you hear topic being called humanities, and that's because it is a blend of two different subjects, geography and history. So when we do topic, it's really, really important that we think about these two words and understand what they mean. So you might want to pause your video for a moment, and you might want to just have a little think to yourself about what they mean and what's the difference between the two of them. Okay, so let's think about what these two words mean. Geography is the study of people and places around the world and how they interact, how they work together. So geography could be learning about different countries. It could be learning about where different places are in the world, where different continents are. It could be learning about different types of weather and how they affect people. And our topic about the ancient Greeks is mainly history. So that is the study of how people lived, how did they act in the past. So it is all about finding lots of different types of information that have been left behind through the different years that we've been looking at, finding that evidence that helps us to interpret what life was like in the past. So it's fact finding, it's clue finding. So here we've got a picture of a place in Greece. This is actually found near Athens. And I want you to have a little look at the picture and think to yourself, what does it remind you of? What do you think this place is? How do you know that? What clues are there that gives you that little information that helps you to piece together where you think this might be? So again, you might want to pause the video while you have a look at this picture. What do you think it is? So today we're going to be using the internet and library research to help us to find out about Greek theatres. And if you thought it was a theatre, so let's go back to the picture. If you thought it was a theatre or a stadium, you are right, it is. And this is a picture of a Greek theatre. And we're going to find out about it more together now. So I want to quickly show you a picture of Athens. And you might remember that Athens is the capital city of ancient Greece and Greece today. In fact, if you go to Athens, it's still there today. The picture at the top there is modern day Athens. If you go to Athens today, this is what you're more likely to see. And let's look at some of the physical features and some of the natural features of Athens. So some of the natural features of Athens are it's near the coast. So you can see here in the distance, there's some sea and there's some mountains as well. There's some mountain ranges that surround Athens. If you think about some of the physical features of some of the things that people have built there, you can see that there is lots and lots of different buildings. And it wouldn't have looked like this in ancient Greek times. This has been built over many, many, many centuries. But you can sort of see here a structure that sort of dominates the city. And this is called the Acropolis. And the Acropolis is sort of Greek that means sort of high settlement, high town. And this is what we think the Acropolis would have looked like in ancient Greek times. If you went to Athens thousands of years ago, this is what we think it would have looked like. It looks completely different to what it looks like there. So this is a picture of the Acropolis. And lots of different city-states in ancient Greece had an Acropolis of some sort. Now, we've got to try to remember, everybody, in ancient Greek times, it wasn't a unified country. Today, if you go to different places around the world, they are countries. So, for example, England is a whole country, and Greece today is a whole country, and France is a whole country, and Germany is a whole country. But back in ancient Greek times, Greece wasn't a united country. It was made lots of city-states, and that meant that each city had its own laws and treated themselves separately from each other. So you didn't say, I'm Greek, you'd say, I'm from Athens, I'm from Sparta. So this is a picture of the Acropolis in Athens, and we said that it means high city in Greek. And most city-states would have a sort of high rocky mound or hill that they would build it on. You've got to think, why would they build it high up on a mountainside or on top of a hill? And that was because this is where they built their most precious structures, the most precious things that they thought were the most important to them. And you can sort of see here, we've got some of these very grand buildings, and these would have been the temples that people would worship gods. So in Athens, they would have a dedicated temple to Athena, who was the goddess of Athens. And because they were the most special places to ancient Greek people, they wanted them to make sure that they were protected. So each acropolis was built high up with a wall built around it. So if the city was under attack, the people inside could very easily retreat back into the Acropolis and sort of barricade themselves in, and they could protect themselves, and they could also protect the most precious buildings, the temples. Now, have a little look at the pictures you can see here, and you can see there's some different types of buildings and types of monuments that you can see here. And you can see that the temples here are very grand looking. They've got these pillars that we talked about quite a bit last term. But we need to try and see if we can identify where the theatres might be. So this is a bird's eye view of the Acropolis. And here's the Parthenon. So that's the Temple of Athena. Have a look. Can you see which part you think the theatre is? And how can you tell it's part of the theatre? So again, you might want to pause the video, have a little look. Okay, so if you identified this area here as being a theatre, you were right. And there's also another one here. So there's a smaller one here, and there's a larger one here. And you can sort of see that they've both got this sort of curved shape that you might see in cinemas today or theatres today. And that's because a lot of our places that we watch entertainment, like theatres, we were inspired by the Greeks, and so we copied their designs. And so let's go back to the picture before. You can see here in this picture here, this is where the main theatre was, and there's a slightly smaller one here. Okay. Now, this is what the Acropolis looks like today. So you can see that a lot of those buildings are no longer there anymore, and that's because the ancient Greek period was thousands of years ago, and over the centuries, the buildings have begun to deteriorate and rot and fall apart. But you can still see part of the temple here, so part of it still survives, which means two things. It means that the Greek builders were very effective to be able to build structures, that part of the structures are still around thousands of years later. And it's also still here because it's been regarded as a sort of a World Heritage Site. So it's a part of the sort of Greek history that thousands of tourists every year want to go and visit. And so the Greek people here today, they try very hard to preserve this area to make sure that it doesn't get lost and that people can still visit this important site. Now, we're going to use some websites today to help us to do some research. And again, you might want to pause this video to maybe make a copy of them. I'll put these links also in your timetable that I'll email out to your parents and your adults, so you can click on those links as well. But we're also going to look together at this video here. And this is a little video that's going to talk to us about Greek entertainment, but particularly theatres. So what I'm going to quickly do is just share my screen with you so I can quickly share you the video.
The Greek theatre. The Greeks loved theatre. They brought incredible stories to life with drama, music, and dance. So, in ancient Greece, theatres were everywhere. Every town had a big bowl-shaped arena, usually on a hillside, where thousands would flock to sit on hard stone seats and watch the latest play. The most successful Athenian playwright was Sophocles, who won so many Greek theatre competitions that he became a big celebrity. There were three types of plays: comedies, tragedies, which were sad, serious plays, and satyrs, a rude kind of play involving naughty half-men, half-goat characters. Audiences could make a play a success by cheering and stamping their feet. or a miserable failure by throwing food at the performers. But if the audience were getting too rowdy, the theatre staff had big sticks to keep them quiet. Actors in ancient Greece were all men. Hello! Apart from that one. Oh, no, that's a man too. Actors changed the way they looked by wearing masks, wigs, and padded costumes. The chorus, standing below the stage, told the audience what was going on in the story. Lots of the time, they delivered their lines in beautiful song and dance. Their costumes could be even stranger than the actors, with animal skins and bird heads. So next time you see a play, a film, or are even just sitting at home watching TV, remember that it all started with the Greeks and their masks. Just don't try and throw your dinner at the telly.
Okay. So lots of our sort of entertainment today is based on Greek theatre and Greek plays. Okay, so the Greek theatre plays were often performed in honor of a Greek god, the Greek god Dionysus. So he is the Greek god of theatre, and he was also the god of wine as well. And so often when Greeks were performing in different plays, they were doing it in honor of the god. So in a way, it's a bit like a sort of a form of worship to him. And every Greek city would have a theatre of some sort because plays were a very important part of religious festivals and also just entertainment. Remember, there wasn't TV or internet in those days. If people wanted to gain some sort of entertainment, a lot of people didn't read in those days as well. So this was one of the main ways people would be entertained and be able to hear stories. So lots of cities all around Greece would have their own theatres, and they would be able to then put on lots of different stories that they would put in honour of Dionysus. Here's some pictures of what the Greek theatres look like. So they were very large and they're often semicircular, so sort of half of a circle. And the reason for that being a sort of circular shape is that allowed people to be able to see the performance area without anybody blocking their way. And you can sort of see that they slope upwards as well. And theatres and cinemas today still copy that design by having each row slightly higher up behind the front row. And that allows people behind to be able to see a little bit above the heads of the people in front. And we think that the theatres could hold about 14,000 people. So that's a lot of people. And they were usually built on the hillsides. And that's because they would have that natural incline going upwards and downwards to allow people to see. Often, the altar area, so the altar area would be in the front area here where the performances would take place, a bit like the stage today. And that area, the altar, would be in dedication to Dionysus as well. So it would be an area that was dedicated to him. And it was raised. Sometimes the stage was raised within this circle, and this was to make sure that everybody could see the stage and hear. And we learnt about sound quite a bit last term for our topic, and we learned that sound travels in straight lines, and its sound is all about the vibration of the air particles. Now, the way that these theatres were designed, it was designed to amplify the sound. Let me just quickly underline that word for you here. Amplify the sound means to make it louder and make it spread further. So today, if you go to a modern stadium or modern theatre, they might have speakers, which amplifies the sound. In Greek times, they didn't have those speakers. So the design was sort of really good because what it did was it made the sound from the actors echo across that large space so people could hear it really well. Now, if you were a very important visitor, a bit like a VIP today, then you would often sit in the front seats. Today, if you're a very important person, you would often sit high up, so you have a better view of the stage. But in Greek times, if you were a very important guest, you would sit at the front row, so you could see the best view. So here is a picture of what the layout of the theatre would be like. So this circle area here is called the orchestra. Now, you might have heard of an orchestra today. An orchestra today means a collection of musicians who play different instruments to collectively make a sound. And that's where the orchestra gets their word from the Greek word. And this is where the performance would have happened. So they would have this area here where they would do the play. And then the skene is where they show the background. Sometimes this would be raised up as well. Sometimes the performers would stand up on this bit here as well. And if you look at the word skene, this is also where we get our word scene from. So if you replace the K with a C sound, that's where we get the word scene from. And a scene is a different part of a story. And then we've got Kilion, or the theatron. And this is where we get the word theatre from. And the theatron is where the people would sit in a semicircular shape. So we owe a lot of our culture and a lot of our history to the Greeks. Now, the plays were different types. So you would have some comedies, so stories that were intended to make people feel happy and to laugh. And then you'd have the opposite, you'd have tragedies, so stories that were very serious that would have a sad ending as well. But the main difference from today's theatres is that women weren't allowed to act. Women were allowed to attend the plays and watch the plays, but all the actors were men, even if there was some parts of the play that were for female characters. Okay, so the actors would have had to wear special masks that would sort of cover their face, and it would change their appearance. So they would have to play all the different parts. And here you can see there's lots and lots of different playwrights. Now, a playwright is just somebody who writes the story. Okay, so Sophocles is probably the most famous sort of playwright because he wrote lots of different types of comedies, but also some tragedies as well. Now, the audience would be involved in the story, and if they didn't like the play, they thought it wasn't very good, or the story wasn't going the way they wanted it to go, they would often throw food and sometimes stones at the actors if they didn't think it was good enough. So imagine that now, if you went to a play or theatre or maybe a pantomime and you didn't like it, you would just throw the food at them. And here are some of the examples of some of the masks they would have worn, okay? And they would help to show whether it was a bright, sort of light comedy or if it was a dark, sad tragedy. And they'd often use colours that represent it. So they would use very bright, happy colours if it was a comedy, very dark, depressing colours if it was a tragedy. And often you can see here in the way that the mask has been built, they would make them exaggerated, which means they would make sure the features were a lot more on show than normal. So they make them with big smiles if it was meant to be a happy character, and the frowns would look really, really sad if it was a sad character. And that was because if people were sitting further back in the theatre section, they wouldn't be able to see it very well. So they need to make sure that all the expressions on the masks were very clear so people far behind could see it clearly. Now, the masks were made from sort of fabrics. Sometimes they were stiffened with plaster. So if you think about plaster we use today to plaster on walls, and sometimes we use plaster of Paris to make sculptures and all sorts of sort of models. They would use that plaster to sort of stiffen the features so that they would stay firm, and then they would paint it and decorate it as well. Here's some more examples. Some sort of theatre pictures. So you still see sort of a happy and a frowny face today at theatres, and that is in sort of tribute to the Greek actors as well. If they were playing quite a mischievous character here, you can see this sort of mask here looks quite cheeky. They would often use it for kings and queens as well if they were playing a very important part. Now, this is what you are going to do for me this afternoon. So in your pack, you should have one of these worksheets in. And there are some questions that I'd like you to try to answer. So let me go through the questions for you to answer. So the first question is, why was theatre so important to the ancient Greeks? Question 2 is, how many people would attend ancient Greek plays? So roughly how many people could fit inside the Greek theatre? Why were theatres built on the hillside? So why were they built up on those hillsides? What was the purpose of that? Which god were plays dedicated to? Why was the stage raised within a circle? And then the last one is, what would the audience throw if they weren't happy with the play? So there's 6 questions that I want you to answer, and you are more than welcome to go back through this presentation to find the answers. So you might want to go back through this video to find the answers and then write them down. I'll also send this as a PDF to your adults, so you can use that to help you to look at as well. And you are also more than welcome to go and research yourself. So if you've got the internet at home, you can research ancient Greek theatres and find out for yourself. Now, once you've answered those questions, I'd love it for you to be creative this afternoon as well. And it'd be brilliant if you could create your own Greek theatre mask. So here we've got some of the examples that I showed you before. And again, if you do a quick internet search, you can find so many different types of these masks. And I want you to create a drawing or sketch of a mask that you have designed. So think about a story that you know well. You might want to base it on a Greek mythological story, and maybe you want to make a mask that is one of the characters in a Greek mythological story. So maybe you want to make a Minotaur or a Medusa character. Maybe you want to use Theseus as a hero and make a hero mask. Whatever you decide to do is completely up to you. You might have been reading and learning about more types of ancient Greek mythological stories, and you might want to use that as your inspiration. That's absolutely fine. Now, it says here to create a drawing of your mask, but if you have at home different materials and you want to create your mask, maybe you've got different bits of cardboard that you might want to use. Maybe you want to even create it using paper mache. You could do that as well. Think about what sort of play the mask would be used for, what sort of actor would be using it to perform in as well. So that's your task this afternoon, everybody. Please send me pictures of your creations. It'd be lovely to see your fantastic ideas. And we will see you tomorrow for our other learning.